Hi friends, I am Professor Kshitij Bansal. I teach law at Jindal Global Law School. The module that I'm going to brief you on today is the role of United Nations. You would understand the role of United Nations in ensuring right to peace. You would also understand the role of United Nations in maintaining global order after today's briefing. The United Nations was established in the year 1945 with the primary object to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war. And hence, one of its main purposes was and is to establish and maintain international peace. Under the UN framework, the primary responsibility of maintenance of peace is entrusted with the UN Security Council. The Security Council is empowered to adopt various measures based on Chapters 6, 7 and 8 of the UN Charter for fulfilling its responsibility of establishing peace. Chapter 6 of the UN Charter provides for the settlement of disputes through specific means, and Chapter 7 provides provisions related to various measures with respect to the peace, breaches of peace and acts of aggression. Chapter 8 of the Charter contains various provisions which deal with the involvement of regional arrangements and agencies in the maintenance of international peace. The founders of the United Nations were very clear in their vision that peace is the foundation for achieving other rights. Though right to peace is directly recognized under UN Charter, the provisions dealing with the establishment and maintenance of international peace directly or indirectly give effect to right to peace of millions of people. United Nations is the first international organization responsible for establishing peace in the world after League of Nations. League of Nations was founded in 1919, right after the end of World War I. However, due to the breakout of World War II, the new organization, United Nations, emerged out of League of Nations. It was in 1942 through declaration by United Nations, Mr. Winston Churchill, Mr. Franklin Roosevelt, and they coined the term United Nations. The United Nations officially came into existence on 24th October 1945. When the Charter had been ratified by China, France, the Soviet Union, the United Kingdom, the United States, and by a majority of other signatories. Since its inception, the UN has been called upon to maintain international peace and security and to support the establishment of environments in which peace processes can be consolidated. At present, United Nations has 5 principal organs to handle the complex functions, including the task of establishing peace. The very first is the UN General Assembly. This is the main decision-making and representative assembly in the UN and is responsible for upholding the principles of the UN through its policies and recommendations. It is composed of all member states, is headed by a president elected from the member states. Secondly, the UN Security Council, which is the most powerful of all branches. It has the power to authorize deployment of UN member states' militaries. It can mandate a ceasefire during conflicts. It can enforce penalties on countries if they do not comply with the given mandates. It is composed of 5 permanent members and 10 rotating members. The next organ is the International Court of Justice, located in The Hague, Netherlands. This branch is responsible for the judicial matters of the United Nations. The Economic and Social Council is the 4th principal organ that assists in the General Assembly in promoting economic and social development, as well as the cooperation of member states. Finally, the UN Secretariat, which is headed by the Secretary General, is the final organ. Its main responsibility is providing studies, information, and other organizational and logistical support when needed by the other UN branches for their meetings. The role of United Nations. The idea of establishing peace was one of the fundamental purposes of UN. Hence, the topic of peace was in the discussion of UN since its inception. However, the right to peace concept, which may be grounded on the UN Charter, came into prominence in the middle of 1970s and has since been actively developed by the doctrine of international law at both national and international levels, and in the latter case with the active participation of and support from the UN Secretary General, UN General Assembly, UN Human Rights Commission and UNESCO. A further development of the right to peace concept has been taking place mainly within the framework of the discussion on the solidarity rights or group rights or third generation human rights formulated and advanced by K. Vasek. The need for consolidation of right to peace in international law has been stressed by various jurists. According to V. Kartashkin, it was necessary to adopt a convention which would consolidate, by way of agreement, the right of each person to peace and liberty and to provide for respective measures in relation to the cooperation between states for detecting, arresting, extraditing and punishing persons guilty of committing crimes against peace, of military crimes and crimes against humanity. The important stages in the right to development and right to peace concept, and also in the matter of granting recognition to it at international level, were two conferences of experts held in 1978 and 1980 under the aegis of UNESCO, the reports by the UN Secretary General presented to the Human Rights Commission at 36th and 37th sessions of 1978 and 1981, and also the seminar on the question of interrelationship between human rights, peace and development held at UN headquarters in New York in 1981. The idea of establishing a right to peace as a human right has first came into limelight through a declaration adopted by UN General Assembly. In 1978, Declaration on the Preparation of Societies for Peace was adopted by the General Assembly with no votes against, which states, every nation and every human being, regardless of race, conscience, language or sex, has the inherent right to life in peace. Respect for that right as well as for the other human rights is in the common interest of all mankind and an indispensable condition of advancement of all nations, large or small, in all the fields. In 1981, General Assembly through its resolution 3667 declared that the third Tuesday of September, the opening day of the regular sessions of the General Assembly, should be officially proclaimed and observed as the International Day of Peace, should be devoted to commemorating and strengthening the ideals of peace both within and among all nations and their peoples. On 12th of November 1984, the United Nations General Assembly adopted Resolution 3911, annexing the Declaration on the Right of Peoples to Peace, which reaffirms that the principal aim of the United Nations is the maintenance of international peace and security, and the aspirations of all peoples to eradicate war from the life of mankind and above all to avert a worldwide nuclear catastrophe. By virtue of operative paragraph 2, this declaration proclaims that the preservation of the right of people to peace and the promotion of its implementation constitutes a fundamental obligation of each state. In paragraph 3, the declaration demands that the policies of states be directed towards the elimination of the threat of war, particularly nuclear war, the renunciation of the use of force in international relations, and the settlement of international disputes by peaceful means. In its Resolution 3716, the General Assembly declared in 1986 to be the International Year of Peace and decided to proclaim it solemnly on 24th of October 1985, the 14th anniversary of the United Nations, followed by the observance of International Year of Peace. UN General Assembly has taken various initiatives towards establishing a right to peace. They are the Declaration on the Prevention and Removal of Disputes and Situations which may threaten international peace and security, and on the role of United Nations in this field, Declaration on Fact-Finding by the United Nations in the field of maintenance of international peace and security 1991, Declaration on the Enhancement of Cooperation between United Nations and Regional Arrangements or Agencies in the Maintenance of International Peace and Security 1994, and Declaration and Program of Action on a Culture of Peace 1999. Philip Alston remarked that by the 1990s, the right to peace had been dropped like a stone within the UN due to its lack of clear meaning as a collective right, thereby failing to capture the global imagination or strengthening people's rights. In its Resolution 2002-71, Promotion of the Right of Peoples to Peace of 25th April 2002, the Human Rights Commission linked the right to peace with the right to development and affirmed that all states should promote the establishment, maintenance, and strengthening of international peace and security, and to that end should do their utmost to achieve general and complete disarmament under effective international control, as well as to ensure that the resources released by effective disarmament measures are used for comprehensive development, in particular that of the developing countries. The Commission further urged the international community to devote part of the resources made available by the implementation of disarmament and arms limitation agreements to economic and social development with a view to reducing the widening gap between the developed and the developing countries. In 2005, the Commission on Human Rights adopted a resolution entitled Promotion of Peace as a vital requirement for the full enjoyment of all human rights by all. The Human Rights Council replaced the Commission in 2006, a significant step in the journey towards the identification of a right to peace was the adoption of Resolution 11/4 on the right of peoples to peace by the UN Human Rights Council on 17th June 2009. The Resolution 11/4 affirmed in its preamble that human rights include social, economic, and cultural rights, and the right to peace, a healthy environment, and development. And development is in fact the realization of these rights. Paragraph 15 says this, and also that pursuant to Article 28 of the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, everyone is entitled to a social and international order in which the rights and freedoms can be fully realized. Paragraph 17 says this, and that a life without war is the primary international prerequisite for the material well-being, development and progress of countries, and for the full implementation of the rights and fundamental human freedoms as proclaimed by the United Nations. Pursuant to this resolution, an expert workshop on the right of peoples to peace was organized by the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, at the United Nations office in Geneva on 15th and 16th December 2009, during which the expert participants explored the collective and individual aspects of the right to peace, linking this right to the principle of international solidarity based on a common human dignity. On 5th July 2012, the Human Rights Council adopted Resolution 2015 on the promotion of the right to peace. The resolution established an open-ended working group with the mandate of progressively negotiating a draft UN declaration on the right to peace on the basis of the draft submitted by the advisory committee and without prejudging the relevant past, present and future views and proposals. The resolution was on the mandate to negotiate a text and not on the text itself, which was a different matter. The OEWG held its first session in 2013, and following this session it concluded that there were some governmental delegations while other stakeholders that recognize the existence of the right to peace and other groups which do not, arguing that peace is not a human right but a consequence of the full implementation of all human rights. In June 2013, when considering the working group report in its first session, the Council adopted Resolution 2316, by which it requested the chairperson to prepare a new text on the basis of the discussions held during the first session of the working group and on the basis of the intersessional informal consultations. The second session of the open-ended working group took place from 30th June to 4th July 2014 in room number 28, Palais des Nations, Geneva, Switzerland. In September 2014, the Council adopted Resolution 2717, by which it decided to hold a third session of the working group in 2015 with the objective of finalizing the declaration. It also requested the chairperson rapporteur to conduct informal consultations and to prepare a revised text. The third session of the open-ended working group, which took place from 20th to 24th April 2015 in room 11, Palais des Nations, Geneva, Switzerland. The last 3 decades, UN has actively been working for the establishment of binding document recognizing the right to peace as a human right. UN has not achieved its target yet. There have been other initiatives as well. United Nations, along with its efforts to establish a binding law on right to peace, has taken a number of other initiatives for establishing peace at international level. They are conflict prevention. Conflict prevention involves various diplomatic measures to keep intrastate or interstate conflicts and disputes from developing as a situation which affects peace. It includes early warning, information gathering, and a careful analysis of the factors driving the conflict. Conflict prevention activities may include the use of the Secretary General's good offices, preventive deployment of UN missions, or conflict mediation led by the Department of Political Affairs, United Nations. Second is the initiative of peacemaking. Peacemaking generally includes measures to address conflicts in progress and usually involves diplomatic action to bring hostile parties to a negotiated agreement. The UN Secretary General may exercise his or her good offices to facilitate the resolution of the conflict. Peacemakers may also be envoys, governments, groups of states, regional organizations, or United Nations. Peacemaking efforts may also be undertaken by unofficial and non-governmental groups or by a prominent personality working independently. Peace enforcement is the third category of initiatives which is taken by United Nations. Peace enforcement involves the application of a range of coercive measures, including the use of military force. It requires the explicit authorization of the Security Council. It is used to restore international peace and security in situations where the Security Council has decided to act in the face of a threat to the peace, breach of peace, or act of aggression. The Council may utilize, where appropriate, regional organizations and agencies for enforcement action under its authority and in accordance with the UN Charter. Fourth category of initiatives by UN is peace building. Peace building aims to reduce the risk of lapsing or relapsing into conflict by strengthening national capacities at all levels of conflict and to lay the foundation for sustainable peace and development. It is a complex long-term process of creating the necessary solution of sustainable peace. Peacebuilding measures address core issues that affect the functioning of society and the state and seek to enhance the capacity of the state to effectively and legitimately carry out its core functions. Fifth category would be the category of peacekeeping, as different from peacemaking and peace building. Peacekeeping operations by UN are in principle deployed to support the implementation of a ceasefire or peace agreement, as they are often required to play an active role in peacemaking efforts and may involve in early peacebuilding activities. Such peacekeeping operations may use force to defend themselves, their mandate, and civilians, particularly in situations where the state is unable to provide enough security and maintain public order. It would be fine to conclude by summing up, that the right to peace is a principle that is a recognized right under the UN Charter. The United Nations is regarded as the principal organization responsible for peacekeeping across nations. The concept of right to peace is a concept which is an element as the core of the UN Charter. Other initiatives by UN are conflict prevention, peacemaking, peace building, peace enforcement, and peacekeeping. I hope this briefing has introduced you well enough to the mandate of the United Nations for peacekeeping and the measures through which it is trying to recognize the human right to peace and trying to enforce and implement its peace building, peacekeeping, and peacemaking measures. Thank you.